Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we have an exciting spotlight on Black cinematographers. We have four of the top cinematographers in TV and film, and they're going to share with us today how they do what they do and how they're creating opportunities for the next generation. We're going to kick things off introducing our first player here, Mr. Bruce Cole, John Simmons, Donald Morgan, and the lady in the house, Michelle Crenshaw. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, now.
So why don't we start this with explaining to the viewers, and the viewers will be a lot of student groups at colleges like Emory, Cal State Northridge, the AU Center in Atlanta, Howard University, Wayne State in Detroit, the University of Illinois in Chicago and Evanston, as well as industry folks. But explain to those people who may think they know or have some vague notion of what a cinematographer does, what exactly are the responsibilities of a cinematographer? We'll start with you, Michelle, if you don't mind, ladies first.
The responsibilities of a cinematographer is to help to work with directors and production to create the visual look of the product, whatever that product is. You know, whether it's scripted television, commercials, music videos, or feature films. We deal with not only with art, we deal with light, we deal with shadow, we deal with composition, and we also service as supervisors with grip and the electric team. But it's really visually just trying to show a story through the art of photography.
Anyone else like to add, Bruce?
I'm gonna leave it to the OGs, man. They
Well, I guess when you're in the company of John and Donald, you kind of want to, you kind of just want to.
Totally, because you know they're the
Morgan.
masters. I worked with both of them as operators and assistants. Are you kidding? They're top of the line.
Yeah.
And Mr. Simmons and Mr. Morgan?
It's communicating also, communication with producers, studios, art directors, everybody from top to bottom. You're the answer man. During any one day, you might answer anywhere between 100 to 200 questions and you don't even realize it, you know?
Yeah, I never thought about that. That's true. We are the answer people. Everything eventually filters down to us. We're the one that is asked about time, how long will it take? We're asked, why is that like that? We're definitely the answer man. And I think that there's a process of becoming fluent with the equipment and the communication with the crew so that you can navigate that world of producers and executives. Because like Don said, it's all about communication. And our final obligation is to be able to be efficient, be able to be creative, and be able to take those words on a page and help the director give them life, to have some kind of emotional, visual interpretation. I think that is what I feel my responsibility is, and all my friends on the screen.
Yeah, I feel like I learn every time I listen to you guys, about what this job entails. I remember we were speaking over COVID, at the height of COVID, Johnny, and you said something like, you have to remember that productions spend millions of dollars in prep, putting together a film. And then at the end of the day, they turn it over to you. And I think that is hitting home more to me now than ever, because as I realize, as I'm brought into prep earlier, I'm finding out how much more power I have in terms of, like you were saying, Don, answering all the questions. In doing Queen Sugar, for me, it was like the first time I would get drafts of the set build in my email, and I'm like, cool. It's like, well, no, it's not cool. It's like, what do you want to say about this? And I don't really have an opinion until I bumped my head a few times on set being like, man, I wish the set was a little bit longer, or I wish the windows and the bed placement, every time the bed is placed right there with those windows like that, I have a problem. So now I'm in there from the get-go telling my production designer what I prefer in terms of the lighting and the way sets are laid out, in terms of how high they are off the studio floor. It's just like you said, Don, is just DPs have so many questions that I think that so many people don't realize, because a lot of people think that at the end of the day, we're just cameramen or camera women. And the reality is that it's so much more. Once you become a director of photography, you're no longer having to worry about a camera. There's people that do that. So
that's funny. It's true.
Probably one of the most common misperceptions about a cinematographer is that they are cameramen and women. Let's talk about the differences between being a cinematographer versus being a camera operator.
Well, the camera operator basically executes the move on the camera that the cinematographer has designed along with the director. And, good camera operators bring to the party, ideas on composition, ideas on expedience, ideas on, hey, Bruce, how do you like this? I know you asked for a 35, but damn, look at this 50. And Bruce will say, nah, I want the 35. but so I think that that's a basic difference. The other thing about camera operators that's pretty different now than it used to be back in the day, when cinematographers used to stand next to the camera, sit behind the operator, then the cinematographer was there to have a different kind of relationship with the director and the actors. Now, in this new world of motion pictures, sometimes we're a little bit separate from the action because we're in a tent or over there looking at a monitor, and the camera operator is now standing next to the director and is now making a certain kind of relationship with the actors, right? And that's pretty different than how it used to be, in not so distant past. The director was not looking at a monitor as the Bible, but was standing there with the cinematographer. And both of those people were close to the camera operator. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I kind of described the scenario.
Michelle, Donald, Bruce, anything you want to add?
I think, Michelle, what do you, because you're fresh. Like, I never worked as an operator, so I feel like your perspective is really special because you worked as an operator before transitioning. So what do you do?
Right. Well, yeah. And also I'm still transitioning, so right now I still work primarily as an operator. And then when I get opportunities to allow me to DP or do cinematography, I'll take it, but it also depends on who's asking. But, I come from collaboration, and I kind of started and worked from the bottom and worked my way up, meaning that I was, a loader back in the day, and then I was a second assistant. I was an assistant. So always supporting the camera department, working for the director of photography. And then right now I'm a camera operator. So my relationship on the set is just to facilitate, obviously, what the director and the cinematographer want. Just make sure that there's not things in the frame or things that you don't want to photograph. Work with the grip and electric team. And if you have any, cranes or dolly moves or whatnot, rehearse when you can. and really make the actor comfortable as well. There's a lot of trust when you're on set because it's a relationship with not only with the people you're working with, but also the actors have to trust you as well and feel confident that you're able to present them in their best light. And have them feel comfortable as an operator. And then you also get to watch someone like the Johnny Simmons and the Don Morgans and Bruce, how you light, what works for you, and you learn. And you learn how to protect the DP as much as you can.
I'll tell you, operating was my most fun gig. I used to just love operating. I come to work dressed nice, go home dressed the same way, unless they stitch you in some water.
Well, see, I don't like saying too many people that because everybody wants to be an operator, really. That's like the first job everybody wants to have,
Can't blame them. Can't blame them. That's the job.
So now when the gig starts, how do you go about preparing? What are the first few steps you take in order to prepare yourself for the assignment?
How I kind of prepare, it depends on what I'll get the script, I'll meet the director, I'll meet the production designer. The production designers sometimes are picked before myself, and so what ends up happening, he submits a set that and he submits a set, and that is something that they've accepted that set. They've accepted the windows, they accepted the layout, and so now I've got to come in and work around that environment. Well, I can make some changes, but there's a good conversation. And then I meet with the wardrobe. Then we meet with try to get pictures of the actors, and so that's kind of the prep. I go through. I'll read the script 2 or 3 times, and then it depends on which studio that's financing the project. They have wants and needs. So those are things that of the list that I've got to deal with. And that's something that, I scratch my head and forge through.
I'll say that for years, I was used to getting calls that people wanted to work with me, and it was a little bit deceiving because I want to say maybe about 2 years ago, I got a call from a young woman who wanted to work with me, and she said, "Hey, let's meet." And I thought, oh, okay, I'll just meet with her. And so I met with her, and she wanted to know my ideas, and I didn't necessarily put together an entire package of ideas. And so she told a couple of people how the meeting went, and so they all wanted to do an intervention with me to figure out, make sure that I don't continue to move forward in the business like this. Beautiful sister, I have to say, appreciate her for doing that, because it wasn't that I wasn't used to doing prep, it was just that I was used to meeting with people and discussing a director's vision before I went on with my own vision. So after that, I developed just this way of developing these lookbooks. And I will say that since then, I've landed pretty much like 80% of my jobs, because I do a lot of extensive research on what my particular vision is. And I think when I walk into meetings now, they're a lot stronger because I'm able to come in with something that's so distinct from other DPs' visions. And worst case scenario, at the end of the day, if I don't land the job, I at least know who I was, and I make sure that I brought myself to the project. So, and I use things everywhere from shotdeck.com to Filmgrab.com. These are websites that have movie references. And so once you get out of the movie references, obviously you pull stills, like beautiful stills from Mr. Simmons here. You can go to his catalog, some beautiful photos, and a bunch of other references, art, music, art periods. So that's pretty much what I do now. Like when I get a script, I force myself to do a book of ideas, and then I will meet, so that, again, I don't have the kind of credits that, like, Don Morgan does. So I'm still working my way up to prove myself. So I think young cinematographers really need to get used to that, because there's so much competition out there now. And the one thing that will set you apart from other DPs is your particular vision. So it's good to learn how to develop and see what you see as opposed to what someone else sees, and then you react off of that.
Yeah, to piggyback on the lookbook, because I just had the opportunity in the worst time of COVID, in the height of COVID, I was in North Carolina, and I was able to do 4 episodes for this series called Delilah, which OWN and Warner Brothers produced. But yet I wasn't the key director of photography on it. I came in and worked under this other female, which I was very excited to do and to have the opportunity. So I had to work based on what was already set up and just come in and do the episodes that I was responsible for. And that's when I was introduced to the lookbooks, because one of the directors, Cheryl Dunier, who I worked with when I shot Watermelon Woman way back when, she's the one that introduced me to the lookbook. And I understand now that has come to be the new thing, and you breaking down a script and trying to share your vision or a look of a project. And that's something new to me as well. But
I was gonna say, I find a lot of a lot of people who have spent a lot of years in the business, they don't necessarily like to approach it that way, which is beautiful to be able to approach it raw. But then a lot of younger directors expect that. They expect you to show up with a whole bunch of ideas. And so I lost a job to an older director who didn't want to see that. She wanted to do things the way her and Ed Lachman did, which was, come in and we'll figure it out together, as opposed to you come in with all these references. So I think it depended on the situation. I think it's better to be prepared than to not have anything.
Right.
Yeah, I've before we go on, I've been in interviews that I've brought ideas to the floor. I didn't get the job, but the producers take the ideas and take them for somebody else. So it's, how far do you bring it? I'm just a little suspect, so how far do I take it? Not giving up all my ideas. I'd like to put them on camera. So it is something that, I like to find out what are they thinking about? That's one of the things that I kind of deal with,
So we kind of jumped right into the craft, but why don't you, and we don't need to do a deep dive into this, but tell us, each of you tell us how you got started. How did you begin your careers? We'll start off with Mr. Simmons or Mr. Morgan first, because I would imagine that your career path was different than Michelle's and Bruce's.
My career path began at Fisk University when I was an undergraduate student. A man named Carlton Moss, who is a film historian, director, writer, used to work with W. Du Bois, Paul Robeson's road manager and Lena Horne's road manager. He was my first mentor in regards to cinematography. He used to come down to Nashville at Fisk University and do a class called The Image of the Black Man in American Cinema. And he'd come there twice a month and have this class. And one day he saw my still photographs and he said that I was a cinematographer. I had never even heard that word before. I didn't know what that even meant. And he sent me a subscription to American Cinematographer magazine. And Usman Sambini, the father of African cinema, came down there to talk about a couple of his films, The Money Order and Black Girl, were the films he was screening. And Carlton brought him over to my $50 a month apartment, knocked on the door early in the morning, which is pretty dangerous. You know, a college kid, no telling what you would have walked in on some mornings. And Usman saw my pictures and said the same thing. And I was like, damn, cinematographer, huh? So Carlton came down there to make an industrial film. And I worked as like I did the slates and kept the camera reports and ran back and forth doing stuff. And I looked through that camera, and cinematographers don't get to see it now, but I saw that shutter move and I panned it. And I said, oh man, I like fell in love with that thing immediately. So that was the beginning of my love for cinematography. And then I got a scholarship to USC Film School because of some documentaries that I worked on with Carlton as a cinematographer. And, the thing that I have to say about the camera and me is that when I picked up a still camera, it was something that I knew I could do. I was like attached to it immediately. And when I looked through a movie camera, same thing happened. I felt like, oh, this is something that resonates with me. And then I came out to California, went to graduate school, graduated, didn't feel like I knew a damn thing. So I got a job at a rental house. And from the rental house, I started doing documentaries for other people. They'd ask for a piece of equipment. Did they have a cinematographer? Before I knew it, I was like shooting a sunrise in Maine and a sunset in some other city. And one thing led to another. I started making music videos, and music videos took me to commercials, and commercials took me to TV movies and features. And I guess that's how I started. I make it sound easy when I say it like that, but it wasn't easy at all. It was difficult. At times it felt like the worst decision I'd ever made. First of all, I was a fly in a bowl of buttermilk. I didn't know where Don Morgan was. If I could have just seen Don Morgan one time, I would have felt like I wasn't by myself, right? But there was Joe Calloway and Joe Wilcox, and they were all unicorns to me because the struggle was so independent. My first days on the job were like confronted with the most racist cartoons on Vilmos Zsigmond's commercial and his grip truck. I walked in that grip truck. Carlton had got me the job. I got there early. I walked in that grip truck and I saw the most horrible cartoons of Martin Luther King sitting in a watermelon patch with a diaper on, drinking a bottle of ink, and Cesar Chavez crawling underneath a barbed wire fence with a donkey on his back. And it was just horrible shit like that. And I called my buddy up, Carlton, my mentor. I said, Carlton, I think you got me the wrong gig, man. I said, here's what's going on. He said, Simmons, you know any Black people making movies right now? I said, no. He said, you want to be a cinematographer? I said, yeah, I want to be one. And he hung up the phone. And I had to spend about 2 years with them people. And man, I tell you, it was not easy. And it's just a different struggle now, but we'll talk about that later. So that's how I got started. I don't want to get carried away. I could go on.
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah.
And thank you, John. That was great.
I kind of started out in music. I thought that was my calling. My dad was a musician, and my mom worked in at SC and UCLA as a lab technician. But as music didn't pay the bills, I went to school also for architecture and graphic arts. And so that was something that was really, really close to my eye, doing color separation, being in the dark room, playing with the different black and white negatives, putting 3 of the different densities together to print out posters and that type of stuff, which was really, at that time, exciting. But since that didn't pay the bill, music didn't pay the bill, I had to take little side jobs. And so this buddy of mine called me and said, listen, there's a job at a TV station, KTTV, and that was something that in the mailroom. And so I said, well, maybe I can do my music. That's like a 9 to 5. So I got the job. Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. And having that communication and dealing with the different departments, I would stop on stage, didn't know anything about what was happening as far as what they did on stage. So I would do my route in 15 minutes, and they thought it would take 40 minutes, and I'd be sitting on stage to kind of watch. So I eventually started talking to the guys that do electric. They were outside fixing the lights, and there was an opportunity to start working with them. So I got a call. They said, "Are you available?" And so I took the job, bring a wrench and some gloves. And so, which was really interesting, as I walked on stage, they had all their prints laid out. I could walk up to the prints and actually read the prints. That was like second nature. And they said, "Yo, you can read these." And I go, "Yeah, this is over there, this is blah, blah." And I could turn in my head and look at it as it just laid out. So they wouldn't let me patch in. We rigged the stage. The lighting director came in. He stood in the middle of the stage. The stage was black. I'm holding the ladder with the guy up on top. And that perfect 45-degree Paramount, everything that you could think of, the diamond, hit George Shamp. And I said, uh-oh, this is something that I really think this is my calling. So after being a beginning electrician for about a year and a half, 2 years, they allowed me to be a rigging gaffer, head electric, do these turnarounds. Well, that's when Norman Lear brought his shows, Good Times, Jefferson's, All in the Family, all his shows, Maude. So they were needing lighting directors. So there's a gentleman, Tom Shamp, who used to do Playhouse 90. So there would be a turnover of a variety of different people would come through. Well, they kept the best, the cream of the crop. So there was about 20 of us on staff. And so 2 days a week, I would be electrician. And then 3 days a week, I would be maybe the lighting director on Good Times. And he showed us the basics of 3-point lighting. And so and I still use that today in a variety of different ways, in quality and quantity. And it's been very, very good. And so it's just right now, I'm very happy.
Michelle, tell us about your journey.
My journey is kind of all over the place. But anyway, first of all, I'm gonna say that I grew up in the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. I was a love baby. So I was I don't believe it baby. So I have a lot of older brothers and sisters, and I was a aunt at the age of 4, but also because I kind of grew up like an only child, that gave me room to wander. So I was always out in the streets doing something, getting caught up. And I used to do a little bit of art, but I got impatient with that because I didn't think I was gonna be able to make a living. And then I was 16 when I got my first Yashica still camera, and I started taking a lot of photographs and not sure what I wanted to do in life. Yeah, I took darkroom, did some dodging and burning, the little local newspaper, free paper in Michigan. I would go to see like Roy Ayers and take some photographs and stuff, just wandering. And then I heard about a school in Chicago called Ray Vogue School of Design. And for some reason, they were doing large format, like 4x5 commercial photography. So I said, let me enroll in that. You know, I found out just recently that Isidore Manikowski, he actually went to Ray Vogue School of Design in Chicago. But anyway, but when I got there, he did. They had, you know, but when I got there, I felt like they were telling me what to do and not necessarily teaching me what I needed to know to kind of create. And so I left there and I went to Columbia College. Now, Columbia College had a huge photo department, but also they had a film department. And I took my first basic filmmaking course, 101, with Bolex. And my first little project, I was hooked because the whole idea of telling story. So now it wasn't a static image. It was like you're building to tell the story from beginning, middle to end. I fell in love with it. And I felt like that was my calling. Now I was a little naive because I didn't realize the politics at the time. So you're talking mid 80s. So the politics at the time and just the reality of African-Americans being free to express themselves and tell their story, especially in this medium. But because I did grow up in Michigan and my father was an educational director of Local 600, which was the United Auto Workers at the time. I come from a strong labor background. So, and also community and knowing that at least I had a certain base salary. So one of my instructors at Columbia, because I shot a lot of student projects and I was pretty well known, but then when you try to make a living at it, that's a different story. So they were opening up the union, which was 666, believe it or not, at the time in Chicago. They were opening that up. And at that time, they were focusing on women and minorities, mainly because there weren't any. So, you know, it was just like the opportunity and me being prepared enough. There was a small door for me to walk through, and I took advantage of it. And it served me well for a long time in Chicago. But then I kind of outgrew that environment, and I was also getting older in life. So I said, let me hit either New York or Hollywood. And of course, I'm happy to say that I picked Hollywood because that's when I had the pleasure of the 2 men's names I heard before I even met were Johnny Simmons and Don Morgan. So, and the first African-American men that I had the opportunity to work with, because I was really in an all-white environment for the most part in Chicago before I migrated out here, which was a blessing. I fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with the craft. I'm an active woman. I like that I was able to travel around the world and collaborate for one day or 6 months on a project, telling stories. So that's what drew me within my journey.
And Bruce, what about you? I mean, by the time you arrived, the table was set. So how did you enter into?
The interesting thing is I didn't know how set it was, or at least that there was a table that I was already a guest at. You know, I will say that my first image of an African-American cinematographer was flipping through, I think it was Kodak, and I saw a picture of Malik Saeed, He was like holding like a director's finder or something like that. I was like, who is this guy? And then I started to like search and find out, and then eventually I made my way onto one of his sets. But before that, how I got into cinematography was I was a gifted kid in visual arts, and I grew up in the inner city. So basically, when it was time to start choosing what to focus on in school, teachers kept pushing me to study art. And then in college, when it was time to choose college, you know, my mom didn't really know a whole lot about college, so she just kind of let me do what I wanted to do. Thank God, you know, where some other parents, you know, forced their kids to go to med school or law school, or my mom was just like, as long as you take care of yourself, you can do whatever you want. So I put myself through undergrad, and I just chose a random school in North Carolina for art, which was the North Carolina School for the Arts. And at the time, they had just started up a film program, and their film program looked cooler than the arts program, because the visual arts program would have had me doing scenic painting, and I wasn't interested in doing scenic painting. I was more interested in like expressionist artists like Basquiat. At the time, I had just been hearing about Basquiat because I grew up in the graffiti era, and you know, long story short, but so I chose to do film because I thought it was cool. At the time, there was music videos were on the rise, so I chose filmmaking, but I didn't know what filmmaking was. I didn't know what cinematography was, and so because it was a conservatory, and they ask you back every year, they only would allow me to come back if I chose cinematography as my major, because they felt like that's what I was strong at. But I was terrified of cinematography because I didn't know what cinematography was. So I spent a summer, I went to the library and just read every book on the shelf about cinematography. So I started with Ansel Adams, which was the first, and I read every book that I could, and then soaked up all that knowledge. And when I went back to school, I put all the knowledge into practice, and then I excelled to the top of my class as cinematographer. And much like, you know, a lot of cinematographer stories, when you're in film school, if you choose to be a cinematographer, most likely you will work a lot, because most people don't want to be cinematographers in film school. So I ended up shooting a lot, and then worked as a lighting design, or minored in lighting design. And then eventually when I got out, I worked as an electrician on my way up as a gaffer, and went back to school at AFI, and then got back out, and then just been working. And so, yeah, that's my route.
Yeah, you stay pretty busy, Bruce, that's for sure.
Thanks.
Thank God.
Wow. Well, those are some great stories. Let's talk about some of the challenges of shooting people of color. I mean, you guys deal with cameras and lights and angles, and we know that particularly when it comes to light, you know, it can be challenging, like I'm experiencing today with in this office, with striking the right balance to make sure that you're picking up everything that you need to with our pigmentation.
Well, Michelle has the best light on this show right now for me.
Well, one thing I can tell you, yeah, there's tons of challenges being an African-American woman. And it's still a huge challenge, even though the window of opportunity has opened up a little bit in the last 5 years. There were so many times when I started to feel like, not in the process of who I'm working with per se, because sometimes it doesn't always come from the camera department. It can come from, you know, some of the other departments, but it was quite clear that they didn't want me there, that someone of me, the way I look, shouldn't be here in the first place, even though I might have more knowledge than the person that I'm working under. But that's what I mean as far as what I've learned to be able to facilitate and collaborate with others, as far as the joy that I get in creating story, whatever that content is. I remember after I did graduate from Columbia College, after shooting a lot of films, and I used to be a projectionist for Facets Multimedia, which is like an independent European theater in Chicago. So that's where I got kind of that European aesthetic, because I used to project all their films at Columbia College in the evening, which was fun. But I tried to get a job working at Victor Duncan at the time as a technician, because after you graduate, you know, what do you do to make a living? So I went there and they were needing camera techs at the time at the rental house. It was like perfect. And I remember one of the managers basically told me, you know what, you passed the test, you can take the test, but I'm not going to hire you. It's like, okay. So, but for every door that closed, I just found another door. And eventually they had a training program because they needed people. So that's how I started to work on a lot of union shows in Chicago. And I worked my way up before I left to, you know, LA, because I was accessible, available, and I wanted it. And for those like the Peter Kuttners and the Dave Morens and the few people that did hire me, that's how I was able to develop. I did like 3 or 4 pictures as an assistant on with John Hughes on Home Alone 1, 2, Only the Lonely, a bunch of stuff. And that's how I developed. And then one person, the Carlson clan, which was a group family that worked a lot in Chicago, you know, they brought me in. And I remember once I was just visiting a set, and the key gaffer got upset because I went to Victor Duncan to get a cable because they needed a cable. And how dare I step on the set and participate, you know, when I wasn't employed, and he tried to get me kicked off the set. So, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of stories. We can talk about nooses, we can talk about a lot of things, but, you know, that's not what keeps us moving forward as artists and as African-Americans actually want to contribute to the representation of who we are, as well as try to change the story, you know, and that's really where I'm at in my career at this point.
No, that's a great story. What I was really speaking to, though, were the technical challenges of shooting people of color. Are there technical challenges when working with, you know, POC cast versus European?
You know, it's funny. Oh, I'm sorry.
Because maybe that's not true, but we've always heard that it takes a little bit more.
When people ask me that question, you know, it's always a little difficult for me to answer, because I spent the majority of my years behind the camera shooting Black people. I mean, those were the projects I had. Those were the projects I did. That was the light I understood and the structure I understood. And I used to operate for this cat. And it was so funny because we were doing some polling place, and there's like voting booths. And here comes Richard Roundtree out of one booth and some white people out of the other. And the cinematographer had this open face 2K blasting Richard Roundtree like the sun. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why he was doing that. You know, why he was looking at Richard as such a challenge, you know? The other thing is, for me, I think it's all about, depending on what the situation is, whether it's a fictionalized look, whether it's a practical look, or whatever the case may be, I've never really been challenged by complexion. That hasn't been something that bothered me. I can remember shooting Morris Chestnut in a movie, sitting next to, I can't remember the woman's name. She used to be Marilyn Manson's girlfriend, but she was like bone white. And that was more of a challenge than the cat I was just talking about, Morris Chestnut. And even now, you're dealing with cameras that have an incredible range of latitude. So if anybody's talking about complexion problems now, I really don't understand the challenge. I don't know whether I answered that, but that has not been a problem for me.
I was going to say, I think I find myself in situations now, the more I pay attention to it, like you were saying, it's just the variations. And I think within the African American um, shade of skin tones, like we obviously range, you know.
Yeah, because on Queen Sugar, you're shooting Rutina all the way to Don Lynn, and that, you know, are Timon.
Kofi standing at a doorway, and the doorway is a white trim, and then like I'm wanting to light Kofi, but then now the white trim is lighting up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like, um, you know, and particularly in terms of like the end result, like whether or not we want it to look like an old contrasty stock that has like that vibrancy and a type of contrast that where the shadows are really deep, which on Queen Sugar they are. That's the aesthetic of the show. I find myself having, you know, having to pay attention more to the shadows because, um, you know, yeah, if Kofi with his wife and it's supposed to be an intimate scene, then like there's a certain level of like light that you want to play it at. One's gonna feel a certain way, and the other one's gonna feel a certain. And like you said, Rutina and Calvin, they're laying in the bed, and it's supposed to look like moonlight. So you put this tiny little bit of moonlight on and make it real sexy, but then Calvin is like all lit up because it looks great on Rutina, but then Calvin's like lit up in the bed. So it's
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge when it comes to like trying to balance out different skin tones within the frame. But again, like Johnny, I came up lighting darker skin tones, and so my sensibilities lie there. It's more of a challenge for me to sort of try to take light off of you know, white characters who are sharing the frame, or very light characters who are sharing the frame with darker characters.
Mr. Morgan, Ms. Crenshaw.
Um, I've come through the variety of different cameras and skin tones from mixed talent on set, and so it's definitely a challenge, but I didn't really feel it didn't bother me and even now with the new technology, it's actually a little easier, and I look at light a lot different. In the earlier days, I had done a little bit of that blasting, but then it didn't really get me anyplace because then somebody would be very light skinned, like I'd say I have to say, bring a show back, the Jeffersons. Okay, you'd have a couple of married couples there that are on at the different grayscale totally, and so that was really something that caught my eye, and that's something that I've always loved to work on, make sure that I do the best balancing act as much as possible. Now, the way I look at light, I like to do a lot more reflection, and so and using color. Color really makes a big difference, and then how you shape it and the quality of light. So I don't know. I'm not afraid of it, and I love the challenge. And our skin tones are very, very beautiful with all the different skin tones that we are dealt with.
Yeah.
I think Tommy Maddox Upshaw speaks about it a lot in terms of like his experimentation with like, you know, sight gel colors depending on who the character is to bring out that particular undertone. Like for instance, like me, like even though I'm dark, I have like a red undertone, and somebody else might be just as dark as me on a gray scale, on a tone, you know, for those who don't understand, you know, on a scale from white to black, you know, in terms of like shading. We might fit, if we turned our images black and white, we might actually fit the same on the same zone on the grayscale. But if you add the color back, I might have a red undertone and they might have a blue undertone. So sometimes playing with, you know, gels and color will help bring out a person's skin tone, or might help you shift them into a different gray zone or different part of the gray zone. If you want to make it, if you want to make their skin feel a little bit darker, if you want to make their skin feel a little bit lighter, you know, you might want to add a little bit of red gel or a little bit of blue gel.
Yeah. You know, Michael Beach. I was shooting Michael Beach in a movie once. Michael Beach had an unusual quality. I mean, he's about your complexion, Bruce, but as you talk about the red undertone of your skin, his was an interesting kind of green. And when I would photograph Malone by himself, sometimes I'd add a little bit of CTO, you know, just a little bit, you know, an eighth or a quarter or something, not a quarter, but more like an eighth. And that would help. And it was just so unusual to correct that in our color corrections with Michael. It was, his undertone was very different, but you're right. It's
that would make him essentially be a little bit more golden, and like it would make it pop, right? Because if he has green and you're adding a little bit of,
yeah, just, well, for him, it would just basically kind of balance it out a little bit. But yeah, those are different kinds of challenges. And those challenges don't go away with the technology. In fact, they almost increase with the technology because the cameras are so much more sensitive, you know?
Yeah, and one of the challenges I had recently was sometimes with actors with makeup. And if the makeup starts to build up on them, and depending on the angle of the light, it casts maybe a shadow on their cheekbones or somewhere within the structure of the face. And I had that come up recently based on a lot of soft LED light. And for me, it's getting used to also working in more LED lights versus growing up with HMIs and tungsten, where the sources are more controllable and more direct, and learning how to use, you know, a bounced light versus hard light, and adjusting with that with the LEDs and adding color as well. But the makeup too, sometimes the makeup, you know, especially on a dark complected person, if it's the wrong foundation, they start to get cakey and build up. Then you want to, you know, change that as well.
Are there any differences, or how do you adjust your setup working indoors versus outdoors? I would imagine that requires some specific things that you have to adjust in the shoot.
One of my tricks I recently have been learning. I mean, obviously Johnny and Donald have been doing this for years, and so they know. But for me, I've had to try to figure out more, because coming from an independent world where, you know, you don't really have a lot of control in terms of like how, you know, your budget, and then you get on like something bigger, like for me, getting on Queen Sugar, where I actually can start to have the money to control the sun. I think one of the techniques that I've learned to try to use is imagining the sun as your light now. And so you just have to, like when you're indoors, you put your light anywhere, and then you control that. But then when you're shooting outdoors, you don't have control of the light unless you bring in all your lights. But then if you bring in all your lights, you're essentially taking out the sun. So it's like this delicate balance of like when you're working outdoors, learning how to shape the sun. And so you shape it just the same as you do with your light. You just have to make the adjustment that you can't change the position of it. You can only track the position of it and then shape it around that. And so, yeah, there's a big difference between shooting outdoors and indoors, being that when you're outdoors, God is kind of your gaffer, and when you're indoors, your gaffer can play God. But yeah.
Well, you know, once again, there is budget. I like from morning to about 11 o'clock, and then from 2:30 to 6, that directly overhead. Then you need that 20 by 20 to, you know, to soften the directly overhead. But I've seen some projects that you know, they'll go in for the close-up and not really have all that, and then the sun's directly overhead. But it's then it's you know, you're at the mercy of the sun, like Bruce was talking, and I just feel that I like a little cloudy day. That's like some opal, you know, where it just kind of softens it. You still see the direction, it softens it up, because once you get into hard sun, there's a lot of things you see you don't want to see. So that's
You
go ahead.
know, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Working in California, there's a certain consistency to the light. But working in New Orleans and North Carolina, where Bruce is, it's like sunny, then all of a sudden some clouds passed, and you're holding your glass up to see when or your sunglasses reflecting the clouds to see when you're going to get the next break in the clouds. It's a different kind of challenge playing with the sun, those environments. You know, it's not like being in LA or Hawaii or the Virgin Islands, someplace, you know, those are places, even certain places in Africa, just stays consistent, you know, like we're sunny all day. There's going to be no clouds today, you know. In regards to the consistency of the look of a picture, we might face some challenges in LA because maybe the sun might not break, you know, when it's time for us to shoot. Another thing that has changed shooting a lot are the apps that come on our phone now, you know, to be able to track the sun and design our day around the position of the sun. I mean, Sun Scout has saved my life many a times, you know, doing exteriors now, which didn't exist. I can remember the first time I saw some Sun Scout stuff. I was looking at this cat's reel and I'm like, how can there be backlight everywhere in this set? Why is it backlight in this backyard all day long, right? And then I learned about Sun Scout, and then, you know, he was scheduling his day to have this ridiculous backlight coming from every direction.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's probably, you know, going back to what we originally talked about in the beginning, that's probably one of the key primary differences that I've learned in dealing with bigger budgets and not having to touch a camera. Like, you're not a cameraman, you're not a camera woman. Like when you are actually operating as a director of photography, you're not responsible with what the camera's doing. Like, leave that alone. You have to go decide what is being shot all throughout the day and when it's being shot. And that, to me, that became the biggest challenge of like, oh, it's not about, oh, he's really good with the camera and he's really good with lighting. It's like, you have to know how to direct everyone to say, okay, we're going to shoot this wide. Are you going to shoot the wide first? Are you going to shoot the tight first? And at what time of day? Because it will all play into the end result, which I think when I look back at my work, I can tell as I'm getting better with tracking how to make something consistent over a day outside. You know, it's like you know, choosing to do which side first and all, you know, when you gain more experience, you know, I'm paired up with another ASC member, Antonio Calvacci.
He's a great
yeah, you know, it's like I get to learn from him and see how to, you know, maneuver my day, because again, when you're dealing with something where you don't have that much money, you know, you're not able to make those decisions, you know. I mean, you can, once you learn what the nuts and bolts are really about, and then that way when you step back down to a smaller project like I hope to do, you know, you're able to make quick judgment calls because you understand what you're able to control on the larger scale, and then you can implement that into the smaller scale easier rather than stepping from smaller and then moving up.
Those challenges were helpful for me coming from a documentary background as well, where you're just in environments and you have to figure out on the fly how to work with whether it's interior light or exterior and complement the subject matter that you're shooting. And then when I was on Delilah, even though there were like 7 and 8 pages days, and it all took place in an interior office, I started to question, it's like, how do you make the daytime change within the day? And working with light in that sense of, you know, when you have the morning light versus the afternoon light versus going into dusk, but you're shooting interiors. So I started thinking in terms of that as well, to give it a sense of time of what's going on in the office and those little challenges, you know. But it is a big difference when you come from like grassroots running gun versus, you know, having a crew and having access to, you know, gear and explaining to them the little subtle changes and the looks in the course of a day, emulating what naturally is outside.
Yeah, like one of the big things is you know, how long it takes your talent to get to set sometimes. You know, on an indie project, you know, boom, the sun's great, boom, they're here, okay, boom, let's go, great, we got it. But on a big project, it's like we're doing the light, we're doing the blocking, we're doing the lighting, we're doing the rehearsing. So the light might be right all while they're still in the trailer going through hair and makeup. And then when they come out, the lighting is bad. But then not only that, but you have to make normally what, if you're shooting, you know, sometimes you might have one scene that takes place over an entire day of shooting. So it's like trying to figure out, I think for me, that was my first victory that I really felt proud of myself, was when I finally achieved an entire day of shooting that looked like it had happened in 30 minutes. And I you know, once you achieve that and you're like, man, I started shooting at sunup and we wrapped at shooting sundown, but this entire scene takes place in like 10 minutes. Yeah. And I made it look like it was, you know, 10 minutes. The sun was here, and all that. But as a DP, you help the director and the cast and the crew and everyone, you help guide them to where that looks seamless. And to me, that is like the real art of being a cinematographer at this level.
Yeah, that's cool.
Wow. We could certainly go on. Again, thanks, John, for you know, encouraging me to organize this. We're going to definitely have to come back for a part 2. In closing, would each of you share?
I have to disturb you just for a second, Gil, because we've overlooked something that is monumental, and that is Don Morgan's recent Emmy nominations.
Okay.
An anomaly. He's been nominated for 3 shows this year.
Wow.
Out of 4 nominees. No, is it 4? It's 3 nominees. Don has gotten 3 of the nominations.
My goodness.
Don, I had to put you on point like that.
I know that you put me on blast.
I know I had to, because it's just amazing. I mean, first of all, he's got a collection of Emmys. Probably on the other side of that room is a whole wall of Emmys.
I saw one.
But now he's been nominated for 3 at one time.
That is literally amazing. And all the proclamations and things in his office. I mean, an impressive career indeed. And I mean, how does it, I mean, the stage is yours, sir.
We've been very lucky, and this is something that blew my mind, and I'm still kind of mind blown about it, because there's 5 nominees, and 3 out of the 4 that I submitted got nominated. It's very humbling to the max, and so I just kind of, if I'm hoping that actually somebody else wins, but just being part of the being part of it is very exciting. So I'm just it's a little embarrassing. I don't know exactly how to, sometimes deal with it. But I love what I do, and everybody, lets me do my thing and, continue. Michelle and I worked on a show a couple of years ago, and she was my main person to do all of my close-ups, not my close-ups, but the close-ups. And, we talked about, it's funny, we've just kind of cracked the ice on conversation. We could go another 20 years.
Yeah, literally.
But I just would like to say thank you very much. And Johnny, you the
Yeah,
man.
brother. I love you. I love all y'all.
Absolutely. Thanks, you guys. It has been a privilege to speak with you this morning. And certainly, Johnny, where can those who are dreaming of one day following in each of your footsteps, where can they go and obtain resources that will help them move forward?
I don't know if I really understand you, because
Well, resources for people looking to become cinematographers.
well, I'm very accessible to everyone. I try to keep it that way. I'm reachable through my email address, which is basically my name, and also through my Instagram. But Don and I and Michelle and Bruce as well are very interested in reaching back. We can't move forward without reaching back. And that's very important to all of us. Each and every one of us is all about creating a more inclusive environment. And as Michelle said earlier in her conversation, nobody expected to see her there. So it's been our job for the longest time to be able to create a different kind of optic, to be able to create an image that's easy to see. We want our sets to look like the world, and all of us try and do that, to be able to have a young kid peep in our stage door and see the possibility of an opportunity for them. That's one of our goals. And in terms of wanting to be a cinematographer, that's a decision that's made from the heart. It's not an intellectual decision. It's like when Don was talking about being a musician, or me talking about being a still photographer. That's just something we have to do. Everybody on the screen right now has to do what they do. It comes from the heart. And here's something that's a greater reality than that, is that our passion is greater than the obstacles that we've been confronted with. And anybody that wants to be a cinematographer has to approach it from that position. There's no other way to do it. Because now, for us, it was a very racist environment that we had to work our way through. For Bruce, it's still a little bit of that, for sure. That ain't going nowhere. That's in the heart of America. But there's also an oversaturation of people doing it with the advent of digital cinematography. So the struggle has become different. But it's our job to be able to open the door and create a world of possibilities for people, so they can reach out to any one of us on this screen. That's what we're available for. You're only as good as how much of the world you're able to affect in a positive way.
And I know you're a board member at the American Cinematographer Society. Are there any programs?
I'm a vice president there and a board member. And we have the vision committee at the ASC. And the vision committee is about helping people navigate their careers. But still, nonetheless, we're confronted with an industry that confronts people on an individual basis. It's like, it's a pathless land that we're traveling. Just as you asked all of us, how do we become this? There's no path. There's no defined path. In the old days, there was, but the old days didn't include us, which was to work as a loader, an operator, and a cinematographer. Michelle is an anomaly for that. I worked as a loader, an operator, and a cinematographer.
Yeah, I would just say, the main thing I learned over the years is to just never give up. I think that's the number one thing. At some point, it will, because a lot of people look at me, and they might think that like, oh, I'm like this young whippersnapper, but it's like no. I've you ask anybody, I've been working for over 20 years, and I've coming from where I came from, I've had to make decisions that I've had to live with, in terms of how to survive. And I think that where I am now is just a testament to me just not giving up and just finding a way to stay in it throughout every pandemic, whether it was or epic event, whether it was 9/11, whether it was freaking mortgage crisis, whether it was the advent of digital cinema, like every single milestone along the way, you have to figure out like, do I care about this enough to stay within it, to continue to work? Because so many people will drop out and they'll just say, oh, it'll make some excuse. But if you really want to do it and get to the point to where you love your job and you're happy and you're making images, you just have to stay in it.
Right.
And also what's really helpful is, Gil, even like, your organization, the African American Film and Critics Awards, it gives us access to share our story and open it up so people can realize we exist. Because for a longer time, they don't pay attention necessarily to the credits at the end of movies or whatnot, but they didn't even realize we were existing behind the lens the way we are. So we are out here to contribute. And it's organizations like yourself that expose, us to, hopefully someone will give us a call. And yeah, we're all open to sharing, because if we don't, that's not going to move us forward in a progressive way. Yeah.
And we'll leave the final comment to Mr. Morgan.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm chairman of the Inclusion and Diversity Committee for the Camera Guild, and I'm here to make a change and be part of it. Things can happen, and right now there's a lot of studios that want to make it happen, but for a long time, yes, it was that uphill, and so now they're knocking on our door trying to make a change. And so I just did a short with a bunch of students from the HBCU. 25 students came from around the country, and this last weekend was really interesting. Some really smart people, and I'm really happy that I was part of this and gave them a leaf. So we'll hopefully grow to be some really fine people. But we can do it, and we're going to do it.
Well, thanks to each of you for your time today. And on behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, we appreciate what you're doing, and we are committed to your point, Michelle, of using the power of our mediums to let people know your stories and let people know the contributions that you're making to the industry and society at large. So with that, you guys have a great day.
Thank you.